Hey there, Svashtis here. I've just had quite a few requests on revisiting some of my older code that allowed you to add functionality similar to Stardew Valley, My Life at Porcher, Graveyard Keeper to the kit. So, farming simulators and what have you. So I've started out, I'm going to do a bit of a series on these because there's quite a lot to it and they're fairly complicated, so this requires addition of code. So these tutorials will also help you look at how you expand the entity objects in the kit, how you add extra code to them, and how you use them and create your own type of entities. This particular tutorial will look at building entities. We're going to look at the ability to place down a plot, put some plants or put some seeds into it, and have that plot grow. So we'll start a new character and have a quick look at this in action. So I've given myself a few new items. We have, I haven't bothered with graphics, but we have a type building of a field. This would be a small field, and we have a pumpkin seed. So we'll go someplace where we can place this. This is a new building, so we'll look at adding new buildings in the game. Try and find some place I can place it nicely. There we go. So we've got a small field, and if we access this field, it has storage similar to a campfire, and we will drop a seed into that storage. Notice that the seed immediately disappears, and we will slowly grow a bunch of plants very fast. The plants grow bigger, and boom, pumpkin appears and the plants are gone. See if I can pick up the pumpkin. I haven't really done too much with there we go, picked up a pumpkin. Some of these are just basically demo art, so I think they've got a lot of their transforms and what have you in the wrong place. So we have a pumpkin, a junk item pumpkin that was created by placing a seed. Now notice if I place a second seed in here, it doesn't vanish. We'll look at the code why in a minute. There we go, our plants grow, our plants grow. It's got 3 stages of plants. Boom, our pumpkin disappears, a seed vanishes, and our plants start growing again. This may or may not be desired. There's plenty of ways of getting around this, but that's just how it works at the moment. And one last time. Boom, pumpkin. Okay, so we're going to have a look. This is an expansion on a building entity, and it's working very similar to a fireplace building entity. So if we have a look at our code, we are overloading basically a storage entity, gaining all the functionality of a storage entity, and we've called it a grow controller entity. We'll have a look at the actual prefab which is placed, because that is using this grow controller entity script rather than a storage entity or a fireplace entity script. All of this stuff here, the title, the owner objects, camera objects, which are required for the kit network connections, this is all coming from the base of the fact that we have a storage entity class. Hit points, build distances, dropping items, all of the rest of the stuff. Storage settings, we've given ourselves a 1 slot limit, and here this grow controller settings are what we have added in. Now I will release this this code, and this code will change over the next few weeks or months as I add more code and change this. But how we've started, the idea behind it is we have, if we look at our scene, we have a bed of some sort. Looks like a nice garden bed. It's a generic garden bed, and it can grow a bunch of crops depending on which seed is added. As the seed is added, it will instantiate over a time, every 5 seconds at this rate. It will instantiate a new object in the middle of it, a new game object that looks like some crops, and then as time goes on it will change that object in the middle, so that we have a nice different graphic growing, and then when it's finished it removes all the graphics and pops a whatever the harvest item at the end of it is. There's a few issues. Now this is now creating our own storage entity or our own building. There's a few things we need to be concerned with this. If you just copy an existing one and delete all of the objects, that's fine, but it still won't work fully. You will need in your root a nice light netlib identity script. If we look at the chest, it will have a container entity, fireplace as a fireplace entity, the foundations I think as a building entity. And we've got our grow controller entity script, which as I said inherits from the building entity script. This grid visibility checker is deprecated, I think there's a replacement for that. Container is just a useful sub game object and a useful transform to keep everything nice and centered. And dirt rows is our actual mesh renderer. Now a big thing with these, it's an important aspect of this, is your building materials script. You need to add that to every single mesh renderer in your game object, and then you need to set your, if you just drag it in it'll be empty. You'll need to set your can build material, cannot build material. These all come with the kit, and what this essentially does is as you're dragging it around, it will replace the material with green material or red material depending whether you can or cannot place it. It's a bit blown out. This will have something to do with my mesh renderer and my shader, possibly the metallic alpha or something like that, or the smoothless, maybe the metallic, I don't quite know, but it blows out when the scene is light, so that might be something you might need to just think about when you place your object. But normally it's basically that's what this will do. Building material, change the color to red or green of the sample shader. The other aspect of it we've got in here is our plant grow location. This is just another transform which we can stick somewhere, nothing in it in this game object, and this is used by our original script to decide where we're going to spawn our extra objects, our growing plants. And the last thing that's quite important, when you drag a grow controller entity script, these two elements will be empty. This will be size 0 and these two elements will be empty. This needs to be set to something other than 0, 1 or 2, and you need to define what this is. Fireplace, chests, and that by default can be either a foundation or furniture, which means that they can be placed like a foundation anywhere on the map. This is again a kit code, you'll find that elsewhere in the kit. Or furniture, which means they're placed on a slot within a foundation. So these are the other things you'll need to set from the original kit functionality. The rest of the stuff, unless you're in particular want to worry about your hit points, lifetime, not really an issue to worry about. Now what we've added in our grow controller entity script, these are our new functions. The idea is, at the moment I have an array of growable items, things that can be grown on this plot. This is a small plot, perhaps you can't grow apple trees on it, but you can grow small crops. If you can have a different grow lot entity, that could be a large plot that might grow different herbs. So I've given myself this an array of growable items, and within the growable items, each item has some variables. So there's the state, which we'll look at in a second. There's the seed item. So this pumpkin seed junk item, which if we look at our items is just a normal kit item, junk item icon, just your question mark here, has a drop model, not much else. I mean, you could change your sell price, weights, all the rest of the stuff, but it's very, very rough. So depending on what this seed item is placed into the container of this grow lot, it will then activate the grow lot and run through these states. And there's a grow interval here, so every 5 seconds it will advance from the blank canvas state. It will instantiate the very first game object into the plant grow location, After 5 seconds it deletes that object, instantiates the second object. After 5 seconds it deletes that object, instantiates the third object. And after 5 seconds it determines it's run out of objects. It deletes all the visible objects that have been instantiated, and it spawns the harvested items in this amount. So 1 pumpkin junk item. And here's our plant grow location here, which is just dragged from there to there, which basically just gives us a transform in our, and it'll grow the grass there if we want, or it'll grow the grass wherever. It just gives us a transform. It's pretty simple as an initial start. Big issues being as we delete or destroy these objects and instantiate the next one. That's not great. We kind of want to do a bit more difference. Also, the grow intervals are equal across the board. I mean, we might want it to be that the growth time from nothing, well, the growth time from the first one to the second one could be a lot faster than the second one to the third one, and as it gets bigger and bigger it takes longer and longer. So we'll look at that in the later version. But this is a very, very basic sample and idea. Really, the idea is we're just instantiating from a list of objects into the middle to give us the appearance of growth. It could be used for quite a few different things. It doesn't necessarily be used for a farm. Something like this could be used if you would like to place down a building and have the building built over a period of time. The building slowly builds frameworks up, and then after 2 or 3 minutes, boom boom, the whole building exists. So this code could be used for something like that, and we'll have a look at that. Now look at these extra variables down here. You'll notice they're light netlib variables. These are to sync between the server and client, because these need to be known. These are determined on the client. On the server, we don't want the client to decide that something's visually grown or something's finished growing. If we have a look at the actual activity, the entity update loop, one of the first things after we've done the change in visuals locally, if we're not on the server, we don't do anything. We certainly only want to do the rest of these checks if we're on the server. So we'll have a look at the top. This code, as I said, it derives from a storage entity to give us all the benefit of being a building. And we've added a category here, 7 grow controller settings down near the bottom. We have a list of growable items, which is a grow class. That is our second class here. It's a serializable class. It contains, so each item that you wish to grow, I wish to have a pumpkin seed, a corn seed, a wheat seed. So it defines what the seed is and the amount of the seed required. I haven't really coded too much about that. There's a few checks that are missing. It will attempt to delete the seeds required, but it doesn't bother checking to see if there is enough, that sort of thing. But we'll look at that later. So basically there's the seed, which is a base item, an interval, how often it grows between it, and if it gets to the end, it returns the harvested item. And the state of game object is just a list of game objects. Now, so if we have a look, we've got a bunch of serialized fields. The growth state being where we are in the growth state. 0, we haven't started growing. 1, we're on the first level. 2, we're on the second level. 3, we're on the first level. Visual growth state, what is the visualized state? So 0, we're displaying basically the raw grow lot entity scene. We haven't changed anything. 1, we are displaying the first element. 2, we're displaying the second element. 3, we're displaying the fourth element. It's different from growth state because we can increase our growth state with time, and then we want to kind of say, well, we're currently displaying element 0. So the first visual item, we've already advanced to element 1 because of time, so we better delete that one and jump over to the second one, just because where we've broken up may or may not be the best way. I'll have a look at it and maybe refactor that, but that's what we're doing currently. Growing elapsed as a time field, so we just use the internal Unity clocks, and it just keeps adding it to that, and as soon as this value here, growing elapse, reaches the group interval, or the growth interval, sorry, it resets back to 0 and elevates the growth state to the next level. And grow item is the number within this growable item array that we're currently growing. We have remembered our currently displayed game object, which is the one of these 3 elements here, just so that we can delete it afterwards. Not the greatest, we're going to have to look at something different. Here's all of our properties which feed back to that. We don't want to be editing these values. You can't say growth state is equal to 1. You have to say growth state dot value is equal to 1, because these aren't just plain integers and floats, they're a bit more complicated than that. So we only really access these underlying variables through the properties, because they automatically use the values. Extra data. This is how we are saving all of our data. This doesn't actually work in the kit. There's a bug in the saving code, I believe. I have fixed it myself, so I'm going to just double check that I've got the latest version and then put something up on the Git, because essentially when it saves a building, buildings have a dozen or so properties. It passes these properties back and forth, does a whole lot of stuff. It does not, it forgets in one place to pass extra data back and forth, so it doesn't save extra data. However, once that's fixed, I mean, the fireplace one doesn't work either. None of the, even the kit ones, this function is never called by anything. Essentially what it's supposed to do is when it attempts to save, it says it retrieves the building entity's extra data value, and it just returns the various values we're interested in saving with a colon in between them. So a number, colon, number, colon, number, colon, and when it loads, it sends them back again. We split up the array by colons. We're expecting 4 items in it, growth state, growing lapse, visual growth state, and grow item, and then it says number 1, pulls it out, it's an int, passes to number 2, passes number 3, and that's how we retrieve the value for saving. This save load works if you fix the bugs, but as far as I know, kit default does not work. So we've overridden a few other functions, set up net elements, call our base one. This is just basically ensuring that the 3 or 4 functions down here that we're using, the properties, all are set to the correct values. We want server to client, reliably ordered, all that sort of stuff. Just means you don't have to worry about it yourself. It's automatically set on start. We got a couple of worker functions. These have got a few things commented out, and probably what I'm doing honestly doesn't need to be an async. Initially this was from the Fireplace kit, and you'll notice that we have the ability to do game instance server storage handlers decrease the storage of items. In this point we aren't doing this. The Fireplace, you put wood in it, you put say meat, and you turn it on, and when it wants to grow something it decreases. I think in this case it's decreasing meat, and it increases in the storage cooked meat while cooking. That's all this really does. We're not interested in this. What we wanted to do is the second you've added the seed, we want to delete it. It's no good allowing you to remove the seed halfway through the growing cycle. That's not possible. So this is the grow final item. It essentially just takes one of our grow classes, which is one of these ones in the growable items list, and it instantiates the harvested item by the amount that you've requested and dumps it on the ground right next to the user. We don't really want to add it to the storage. We want to just have it pop out. You might want something different, but that's what it does currently. Entity destroy, we haven't really done much. And entity update is where everything happens. So basically entity updates is a reasonably common tick. It happens quite often. It's not per frame, but it's fairly often. We obviously need to deal with our entity update in the base for the building entity class. And the first section of code here essentially compares, as I said, we've got the growth state and the visual growth state. This is the state that the grow lot is in. It's either in 0, 1, 2, 3 or 4 in this case, and this is what it's currently showing. So it can say I am in slot number 1, like I have grown to number 1, but it's only showing 0. So if the growth state is different, we ensure that we basically delete any objects, any previous object if it existed. We increase our visual growth state, and then we display the new, instantiate the new object so we can see it. If the growth state is 0, so we've grown to nothing, we get reset to 0 if we get to the end basically of the growth chain, but we are displaying an object. We'll just make sure we destroy that, because we don't want that. Basically means it'll delete the remaining crops. And the last state here was added if the growth state is greater than 1. So there is a growth state, the visual growth state is greater than 1, but we're not currently displaying something. This is a situation that arises when you load the code from a saved game. It'll remember growth state, it'll remember visual growth state. They're both exactly the same, so it skips all of this rubbish, doesn't do anything else, but we're not actually displaying anything. So we must make sure that we display whatever we currently are doing, whatever we're currently at. This happens on server and client. It probably can just happen on client, to be honest, but I've done it for both. Simply because I'm debugging via server, so I couldn't see what was going on. Otherwise now, all we're interested in doing is updating the visuals on the client. If we're not on the server, we give up entirely. This probably could be a bit different spot actually. This basically just says if we haven't set our plant grow location, we give up and don't do anything because we have no way of. It's actually in the wrong place, it'll probably bug out, but this really should be at the top, and I'll move that later. If we don't have a plant grow location, we shouldn't do anything because it won't work. We can't instantiate something at that location. So we get into the growth concept. So if our growth is greater than 0 at this point, it means we are in a growth state. We have users placed some seeds in at some stage and we are growing. We just do a delta time using time unscale delta time. We add it to our growing elapsed time. And if our growing elapsed time is greater than the selected growable item, the grow interval, then we will do some stuff. Otherwise that's it, skips out the whole event. So this basically runs this over and over and over again until we get to that 5-second grow interval, and then it jumps into here. So we've done our 5 seconds, we increase our grow state to the next level, we reset our time to nothing, and then we check to see if the growth state is greater than all of our possible growth states. So if we're on this bottom one and we've now jumped one out, we're basically finished, there's nothing left to grow. Reset our states to 0 and grow the item, pop out a pumpkin and reset the selected item to nothing. So this basically resets it, pops out the pumpkin and returns back to the default empty state. So if we are not growing anything, and we're on the server, we have a quick look. We actually go through the storage entity for the item we're in. We're actually doing an array, but really there's only one slot, and we double check everything in the storage array against all of the growable items that we have added to our list. And if any of the items the user has added to storage belong to one of our seed items, we decide, great, the user wishes to grow this. We remember that the user's decided to grow this, break out of this whole check. So we now know at this point the user has decided to grow something. We remember that and we start growing it and set our growth state to 1 and our growing elapsed. This start growing seed item is just down here, probably badly named. All this does is it actually deletes the seed item from storage. That's why when I placed the seed in storage it instantly vanished. If I place something else into that storage that does not is not one of these grow items, is not a seed item, nothing will happen. Things you could do were actually remove it from storage and pop it out on the ground. So if the user adds something like a fireplace or an axe or something to the farm, and it just pops it straight out, then it just basically rejects it. So, and that's all it really does. A simple trick is we have a bunch of objects with nice little art, nice little models, and we just instantiate these one after another, removing the previous one over time till we get to the end, and delete all that and just pop out our harvested item. It's a simple trick in these two classes. As I said, there's a few issues. Certainly the extra data save does not work at the moment as far as I can tell, but I will double check to see if there's a later version to fix this bug. It's only 2 lines to fix, very very simple. There's a few fiddly bits. I don't like its fact it's called a storage container. I haven't quite worked out whether that's something I can change. This relies on the fact that it's storage. It's doesn't. You can do there's other sort of code issues. We can change our if we look at our scene, we can muck around a bit with our where is it, our what's the name, shader and our material, and change that, say if it's wet or not wet. Obviously we're not checking for water or anything like that, but that's something else we could easily do. The saving functionality with this extra data feature is fantastic. Assuming that the bug's fixed, we can add a huge amount of variables to this, our own enhanced controller entity, our storage entity, and this is great, because we don't need to write our own save routines. It's all in here. I certainly would like to add some water in there. Maybe we can even have it so that you can harvest it by hitting it or something along those lines, but we'll work through on that. But yeah, so that is a very basic, and I've waffled on quite a lot on this. I'll add some more things like this is one other issue I was just going to say. Obviously we have these three prefabs stuck into one, and you see how the save worked for this. Three prefabs stuck into this one little entity. It's a bit annoying. One of the options we could look at is have all your prefabs placed into a global controller, and then that controller just pointed to each of the entities. I'll think a little bit about it, but and the other real issue we want to do is we don't necessarily want to be instantiating, deleting these things. We kind of want to clone them, so it's something I'll look at. But yeah, so very simple, and it gives you a really cool farm system. I hope you enjoy it. Anyone got any further questions, let me know, and I'll see what I can do to answer them. Next video I'll look at doing some transitions between these and cleaning up the code a little bit, seeing what I can do about clones and things like that. Anyway, have a good one. Cheers.